We've all been there, right? That incredible electric feeling at the start of a new relationship. Every moment feels like it's straight out of a movie. But then, well, time goes on, things change, and you find yourself wondering, hey, where did that spark go? It turns out the answer isn't just a matter of the heart, it's actually happening inside our brains. So today, we're going to unpack the science of why that first fire doesn't always burn so bright forever. Wow. I mean, that quote just hits you, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that slow, quiet shift, from that intense, locked-in connection to this silent, lonely distance. It's the question that just hangs in the air for so many couples when that initial heat starts to cool down. If you're sitting there nodding along, you are definitely not alone. This whole transition, it's a super well-documented part of pretty much every long-term relationship. It's not some kind of personal failure. It's a predictable journey. So, let's explore the map of that journey, starting right at the beginning. That first phase of a relationship, it feels like actual magic for a very good reason. We call it the honeymoon phase, but what's really going on is a seriously powerful chemical reaction happening right inside our heads. Yeah, you can think of it like your brain is on a biological timer. During this time, your brain's pleasure and reward systems are just firing on all cylinders. That intense, I can't get enough of you feeling, that's not just a nice thought. It's literally a potent cocktail of hormones flooding your system, making everything feel absolutely euphoric. And get this, research shows that just looking at your partner's face is enough to set it all off. And that chemistry clock, it's got a timer. On average, the super intense chemical phase lasts for about 18 months. Yeah, it's a surprisingly specific window where our biology is basically the biggest cheerleader for the romance. Okay, and this is the most crucial point right here. When those intense feelings start to change, it does not mean something is wrong with you or the relationship. Your brain is simply shifting gears. It moves from the chemistry of that passionate, all-consuming love to the chemistry of attachment, the kind of deep bond that can actually last a lifetime. It's a totally normal, even necessary transition. So what happens when the high wears off? Well, this brings us to a really critical turning point. Once that initial chemical rush fades, the relationship enters a new and, honestly, a more challenging phase, where deeper, real-life questions start bubbling up to the surface. People often call this the 3-year itch. By this point, the initial newness has worn off, and all the real-life stuff, we're talking money, family, future goals, you just can't ignore it anymore. This is the moment where couples have to face whether their core values and life plans are truly lined up for the long haul. And what's wild is that researchers have actually mapped this out. There's a pretty predictable arc for different parts of a relationship. As you can see, sexual frequency, that tends to peak first, at just under 2 years. Then comes companionship, which hits its high point around 2.5 years. And finally, commitment, reaches its peak at almost exactly 3 years. And this graph shows it perfectly. Just look at the chart, see how that line for commitment climbs, and then hits its highest point right around that 3-year mark? After that, the data shows this gradual, gentle decline. It's not like it falls off a cliff or anything, but it's a clear, natural curve that signals a really big shift in the relationship's dynamic. Okay, so we've covered the biology and the timeline, but there's also this huge psychological shift that can happen, one that can make a couple feel worlds apart even when they're sitting right next to each other. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called a fantasy bond. Just think of it as the illusion of closeness. I mean, on the surface, everything looks fine. You live together, you see family, you're doing all the normal couple things. But underneath all that, the real spontaneous connection has been swapped out for a comfortable, safe routine. It becomes about keeping up the appearance of a relationship, often because it feels secure, while keeping real, honest, emotional intimacy at a distance. So here's a really clear breakdown. Real love is all about substance, spontaneity, and being your own person. It's fueled by genuine, heartfelt affection. A fantasy bond, on the other hand, well, that prioritizes the form of the relationship. It's built on routine, it gives you a sense of security, and pretty soon it can start to feel like an obligation. So what are the red flags here? Well, you might notice physical attraction takes a nosedive, or maybe you've lost your own identity, always saying we instead of I. Your conversations might become all about logistics, bills, groceries, chores, instead of what you're actually feeling. You might stop trying new things together, and this unspoken anger and resentment just starts to build up, slowly poisoning the connection. So all these psychological shifts, they lead to a very real disconnect. Let's dig in and unpack some of the specific reasons why that initial interest and passion starts to fade over time. One of the biggest factors is something called the intimacy gap. So imagine closeness on a scale of 1 to 7. For one partner, maybe getting to a level 4, a good friend, feels totally comfortable and secure. But for the other partner, a true partnership might mean needing a level 5 or even deeper. And this creates a gap where one person is always trying to pull the other closer, which leads to a lot of frustration and eventually a loss of interest. And then you've got the stagnation trap. You see, a parent's love is unconditional, but romantic love, not so much. It's totally conditional on mutual respect, on growth, and on engagement from both people. You can't just win the relationship and then sit back and coast. If one person stops investing in themselves or in the relationship, the connection is just bound to stagnate. And finally, the scales of importance can really shift. At the beginning of a relationship, there's often this dynamic of pursuit, right? Which creates a certain kind of energy. But as the relationship settles, that dynamic can flatten out. The real danger is when the scales tip the other way and one partner starts to feel taken for granted, like their value has gone down. And when that happens, interest and attraction can just naturally fade. Okay, after all of that, it might sound a little bit bleak. I get it. But understanding this evolution is actually incredibly empowering. The goal isn't to stop the spark from changing, it's to learn how to navigate that shift from a bright, hot spark to a steady, lasting warmth. This right here is the most important thing to take away from all of this. The ebb and flow of interest and connection is totally normal. A fading spark doesn't mean your relationship is doomed. It just means it's evolving, and it's entering a new stage that is both predictable and absolutely manageable. So how do we actually navigate this? Well, it all comes down to being intentional. To close that intimacy gap, you have to communicate your needs openly. To avoid getting stuck in a fantasy bond, you have to make real quality time that goes beyond just paying bills together. To stop resentment from building, you have to tackle conflicts head on. And to escape that stagnation trap, you have to support each other's individual growth. And that's what keeps the relationship vibrant and alive. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. Maybe the ultimate relationship goal isn't to desperately try and keep that initial, unsustainable fire burning forever. Maybe, just maybe, it's about learning to build something totally different. A deep, steady love that provides warmth and comfort long, long after that initial spark has changed into something new.